I'd heard stories about this famous Bugatti in the lake, which was a kind of a myth. They called it the beauty of the deep or the lady of the lake, and people said, you know, there's a Bugatti down there at the bottom of Lago Maggiore. So for years and years, that was kind of a fable.
I wouldn't say the cars are art, they are industrial engineering pieces of excellence, but I would say Mr. Bugatti was an artist who expressed himself in cars.
I started collecting French cars about 35 years ago. Subsequently, of course, I fell in love with Bugattis. They kind of became the apex of the collection.
The Type 13 was called the Brescia because it won the most important voiturette race at the time in 1921 in Brescia. The Type 22 Brescia was the long wheelbase version of the Type 13 Brescia.
The two competing stories are, one, that it ended up in the hands of René Dreyfus, who was maybe the most famous Grand Prix racing driver for Bugatti, and that in a poker game in Paris, after a couple of magnums of champagne, he actually lost the poker game and had to pay his debt off by giving the car to Adalbert Bodé, who was kind of a professional gambler.
When this happened, the Brescia was a 10-year-old car. I do not believe that Mr. Dreyfus would have lost an old motor in a poker game. Obviously, Mr. Dreyfus died quite a while ago, and we can't ask him anymore.
The competing story is that it was actually, no, it was owned by a Swiss architect. The daughter of the architect had said, was this your dad's car? She said, my dad never owned a Bugatti. So that kind of destroyed that argument. So the preponderance of proof is that it was in fact René Dreyfus, and it was lost in the poker game. And it was brought to Switzerland by Bodé. And when he crossed the border, the customs guys said, where's your paperwork on this car? And he said, no, I'm a Swiss citizen and this is my car and I'm bringing it home. And they said, well, you may be a Swiss citizen and you may be going home, but this car isn't going home because this is not registered. So they confiscated the car. Professional gamblers are either broke or flush, depending on given circumstances, and so he was not able to retrieve it, and under Swiss law they were required to destroy anything that was confiscated, and so customs officials decided, well, we could dump it into Lago Maggiore and that would destroy it, but they had a clever idea that if they dumped it in on the bottom of a chain, they could leave it underwater until the heat died down, then they could pull it out, except that they used a rusty chain and the chain broke, and so instead of being 35 feet down, hanging from the end of a chain, it went to 173 feet down to the bottom of Lago Maggiore, and that's where it stayed from 1935 to 2009.
I heard this story many years before the car was actually recovered from the bottom of the lake. It's quite typical that in the end it was a Bugatti, and that a lot of myth is built around that story. But it fits into the folklore of Bugatti, and it adds another snippet of romantic information to the brand. Then I heard about it again from my good friend Peter Mullin. He is less critical and believes in things. And he said, one day this car will come up and I will get it.
When I heard that they were going to bring it up out of the lake, that was intriguing. And then I learned of the story of why they were going to bring it up. The son of one of the lead guys of the Ascona diving team had been attacked and beaten and then died. That same diving team went down and was able to bring up the car in 2009, bring it out of the lake, auction it, take the money to fund a charity that fought youth violence. As an archaeological relic that had been down at the bottom of a lake since 1935, it was worth preserving because of its tremendous history.
When the car came up, the estimate was about 50,000 euros for the car. It fetched a lot more than that, because not only Peter Mullin wanted to buy it, but also a Bugatti enthusiast from the Netherlands was very keen on acquiring the car.
We decided that we wanted to actually win that bid and bring it here and put it on display in our museum here. My theory was that Ettore Bugatti started in the creation of this piece of art, and Mother Nature finished the creation.
The way that Peter displays it at his museum in Oxnard, you go to a separate room, which is quite dark, and you see pictures of the divers while the car was recovered. That gives a very special atmosphere.
When visitors come to this museum, mostly they want to see what would be considered the Mona Lisa of the automobile, the Atlantique, of which there are two in the world. But when they leave, they're talking about the Lady of the Lake. It's kind of an entire story that is emotionally appealing to people. The parents of the young man who was killed have been here a couple of times to look at the car in private because it kind of reminded them so much of their son. The mother of the young boy, she just wanted to be alone with this car here. When she came back out, she said, you know, my son is gone, but his soul is still in this car. And of course, that was such a touching point, and she was so emotionally taken with the fact that this represented her son, who, by the way, had dived down to see it himself. That was, you know, something that you can't hear that and then not be affected by it.